summer with friends and family, I'm going on a trip in the Boundary Waters, on a canoe portage trip. And this is normally something that I would plan pretty far in advance, but with everything being closed and plans being really unpredictable, this was a fairly spontaneous trip. When we heard that the Boundary Waters was open a few weeks ago, we just decided to plan it for later this summer. So I'm really excited to go on the Boundary Waters, but it's still incredibly unpredictable and uncertain what's going to happen. It could rain the entire week. We could have the worst mosquitoes and the worst black flies you've ever experienced in Minnesota. We could not find a camping spot because it might be really full. But it could also be pleasant and relaxing and a whole lot of fun. And most likely it'll be a combination of enjoyable and challenging, but it's still really unpredictable. The only thing certain about this journey is that it's uncertain. Yet we still journey on. Come, let us worship together. Each week we share joys and sorrows from our community, and this week we're sharing from a handful of religious education families. From Betsy Hearn and family, including Drew, Atticus, and Harper. A joy is that we just spent a lovely week up at Bay Lake with a couple of quarantine and tested Camp Unistar friends, and had some really nice family time celebrating a special 70th birthday for an aunt. A sorrow is that Betsy is still looking for the right next job and wishes she had already landed. From Nate Solis and family, including Karen, Ela, and Lachlan, a sorrow is how much we struggle to name joys these days. This is one, though. My joy is that my family is nearly finished with a 2-week extra strict quarantine so that we can move into my parents' house for 2 weeks and they can hug grandkids and everyone can hang out. From Morgan, France, and family, including Sarah, Emmy, and Pete, a real joy is being together as family, having our needs met, and identifying new birds when we are outside. Another joy is just watching Emmy and Pete playing and playing. A sorrow is when the atrocities of the world impact our relationships. And let us pray. Spirit of life, we give thanks for family time and birthdays and even strict quarantine rules so that we can spend time with our loved ones. And we are sorrowful for the unpredictability of this time, for the challenges that infect our souls and our relationships, and the instability of finances and vocation. We know that these days and all days are made up of many joys and sorrows. Thank you for reminding us of this and encouraging us to share with one another and continue to hold these joys and sorrows in our heart and move together in remembering what's most important. May it be so, and amen.
When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. Weirdest summer ever, am I right? I mean, we could not wait for school to get out because school was weird this year, right? And we allowed ourselves to get excited about summer vacation. And we had hope and faith that with summer, the COVID virus would perhaps release us out into the sunshine, and we would do the things we'd planned. We'd have vacation, and we'd go to the cabin, and we'd go to camp. But a lot of that isn't happening. I'm wondering how many of us had plans for vacations, for trips, for journeys this year. Something where we were going to load up the car, or maybe even get on a plane, or a train, or a boat, and head to an exotic place, or maybe to a familiar place. But some adventure and journey that would take us to something new and exciting and outside of ourselves, and it was something we just looked forward to getting there. And then it's not happening. This makes me think of a story about a boy and a girl, brother and sister, who a few years back had planned an epic adventure, an epic journey to Washington, D.C. And this was a really good thing because they'd never been there, and they were going to go over spring break. They'd never been there. They were excited about seeing the sights, and they were going to see family, relatives, cousins that they either had never seen before or hadn't seen since they were babies. So that was exciting. It was also a little bit bad because they knew they were going to be staying with people that they didn't know, and that felt kind of weird. But as they thought about that, they thought, actually that's kind of good, because it's always good to meet new people who are your family and know that they live in exotic places, cool places to go to. And the father in this family worked in a building that was right next to the White House. So they had visions of going to his place of work and then maybe seeing Michelle and Barack and the kids and maybe the dog out playing on the front lawn. Fantastic, epic. But then a week before they were about to get on the plane and go to Washington, D.C., they got news that their grandpa, his health was fading. And the family had discussed it and decided that it was time to put grandpa in hospice. And if you're familiar with hospice, that's where the person is put into care. They're getting all the care and comfort that they possibly can, but they're no longer receiving treatment in the hopes that they would be cured. So that was bad, because it was bad for grandpa. Also, it meant that it would really not be a good idea to be all the way on the East Coast while grandpa was possibly going into his last days. And so the boy said, "Oh, that's bad. I mean, bad for grandpa, bad for us. I guess no cherry blossoms on the Capitol Mall for us." But then the mom gathered the kids together and said, "Hey, you guys, got an idea. What would you think about we load up the car and we drive to Chicago? I've got friends in Chicago we could stay with, and the Windy City is a great place, and we won't be that far away." And the daughter said, "Yay, that's great. That is a great thing, because Chicago has skyscrapers, and it has blues clubs, and it has pizza, and it has a lot to do. It'll be great." And so they decided, it's great, let's go. And they did exactly that. They had to cancel their plane tickets, but they loaded the car, and they started on their epic journey to Chicago. And it went well until the car suddenly stopped just outside of Des Moines, and they were on the side of the road. "This is bad," the dad said. But then luckily they had AAA, and they called them. The tow truck came and picked them up and brought the car to a truck stop. And so they were at a truck stop, and they were having a meal of chicken fried steak and French fries with gravy all over it. And to this day, the family can't decide whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. But anyway, they were sitting there at lunch when the daughter looked up from her phone and said, "Hey, you know what? My friend Ava from Unistar, she lives in Des Moines, and she just told me that her dad and her can come pick us up and show us around Des Moines while the car's getting fixed." Well, that's a great thing, and so that's what they did. They went and they had this unexpected journey through Des Moines, and they were having a great time when the phone rang, and Mom picked up the phone and said, well, that's not good. Fuel pump. And you can't get the fuel pump until tomorrow, so we're stranded for a couple days. And so everyone looked at each other, kind of glum. What now? This is ruined. But then the voice on the phone said, "Hey, you know what? We have a brand new Toyota SUV at our Des Moines location, and you may use that as a loaner while the car's being fixed." Well, that was a no-brainer, right? I mean, bad news about the car, but let's go get this new car. And that's what they did. They went and they picked up the Toyota SUV. It was an awesome car. It had all the bells and whistles, and they were ready. Let's go to Chicago. It's not far. When the son said, luggage. And they all looked at each other and said, well, is that a bad thing? We have some clothes. We can stop at the Goodwill on the way there. Is it a bad thing? They decided it was not a bad thing, and they headed into Chicago. And when they got to Chicago, they met the mom's friends, and they were lovely, and they had a beautiful house, and they were having a great time and getting ready for this adventure to just keep going, when suddenly the wife there who was very pregnant at the time, started to get really sick. And she said, "I'm sorry, you guys, but you know what? I have to have you leave. I can't risk it. I have to have you go right away." And so they packed up what little they had, and they stood outside and said, "This is bad. We don't have our stuff. We don't have anywhere to stay." And then Mom remembered, hey, you know what? My sister, her husband, knows a guy who's a minister in Chicago who lives alone in this great big mansion, and he has always said anybody can come anytime they want to, and they can stay with me. And so they made that call, and would you believe it? It worked. They drove to this place, and they had this great big mansion pretty much all to themselves with this really nice minister guy, and they had a great time. Now the story goes on like this. The trip has this happening over and over again, where the family makes a plan, a last-minute plan, heads out to do it, and something just doesn't go exactly right, and it looks like this could sink it, but something comes up, and they find themselves in a different spot, doing a different thing, a different experience. Opportunity came up. So they found themselves in a park, spending the whole day doing really nothing, and then meeting people and talking to them, meeting people they never would have met had they have had this on their itinerary. And it was great. They went to the wrong restaurants, they went to the wrong neighborhoods, they went to the wrong entertainment venues, and every one of them ended up being the right thing to be doing. And they had some time to check on Grandpa, see how things were going back at home. And it went on like this, so well, until the dad got the phone call. And he was quiet for a while, and people kind of knew what was being said. And the dad said, "Well, that is not good. So it's time for this trip to end. So we should pack up." And that's what they did. They packed up their few things. They said goodbye to the minister and his big empty house, and they headed home. And when they got home, they knew that Grandpa was not doing well at all, so they went straight to the hospice. When they got to the hospice, they gathered around the bed, and they mussed with his hair, and they talked to him, and they sang to him, and they held his hand. And that was a good thing. Now, I'm aware that this story has some bad things in it, some hard things. For starters, the whole epic adventure journey that they had planned, it all got canceled. It didn't happen. But I also know there's an awful lot of good things that happen in this, right? A lot of good experiences. And what I take from this story is that we cannot always plan the journey that we're on. We do not always know exactly what the destination is going to be. And that can be upsetting, and it can throw us in a tizzy, but it can still work. And I think face it, we're all in this right now. The country is in this, the whole world for that matter, is right now on a journey, on a travel that we didn't expect we'd be on. And the truth is, though, is that it didn't all stop. It's still going. We are always traveling. And the family in this story remembered some really big things about Journey. They remembered that they did have to keep going, that they had to be willing to take the next thing, to look at the next opportunity. They knew some things that were important. They knew they had to keep Grandpa in mind, but they knew they had each other. And they found that they could call on friends, and that friends were able to help them and move them forward. Sometimes relying on complete strangers even helped. And they didn't know exactly where they were going to go. They didn't know how it all was going to end up, but the opportunities and experiences of that journey will stay with them for a lifetime, and they loved it. We will have to have that same kind of thinking as we move forward in this unplanned journey that we are now on. We need to remember we keep going. We need to remember it will have bad, it will not all be good, and we can't say exactly where we're going to end, exactly where we're going to get. But we call on each other, we call on strangers, we remember what's important, and we do it with love. And we will get somewhere. So may it be so. Let's sing Blue Boat Home. The wide universe we travel, we do not know where it will take us. But I hope that we remember as we go forth in this time, we are all traveling. We're all traveling together, and we remember we have each other. We have new people, new things. We must keep going, remembering what's important and doing it in love. May it be so, and amen.
Amen.